Hello everyone, Domino Pivot here for Great Game Butts, where we take a look at video games that are great, but you'll see.
She and I kind of have a will we, won't we romance in progress.
I thought it'd be a good idea to start this with Ratchet and Clank since the series recently turned 15. So today I'll be sharing with you why Ratchet and Clank on the PlayStation 4 is great, but not so great. Wait, isn't it kind of a dick move to make a bad review of a game for its birthday? Oh well. Ratchet and Clank for the PlayStation 4 came out in 2016 and is a reimagining of the 2002 game with the same name. The game draws most of its levels and story from the original, while updating the gameplay to the recipe of modern installments. It also ties in with the Ratchet and Clank animated film from which it borrows a few scenes.
They're making a game based on a holofilm based on my life? But they haven't even consulted me!
While the visuals of a game can compensate for gameplay, nobody can argue that Ratchet and Clank's graphics are astonishing. The frame rate never drops even when the screen is covered with enemies, projectiles, as well as extremely detailed particle effects. The textures are polished, and the only pixels you'll notice in this game are those you get when shooting an enemy with the pixelizer. The special effects are bluffing, with light diffusing through gelatinous enemies and glistening at the surface of water. Add to that the fact that Ratchet's ears and tails respond to physics, and there isn't much more you can ask for. Breaking crates and collecting bouncing bolts has never felt this good. The 3D models of your enemies stretch in an organic and cartoony fashion when you whack them with your wrench. The Groovytron is here again, a weapon you can use to make any of your foes dance. Yes, even the tanks. The quality of the animation really helps bring this world to life and contribute to the game's fun factor. The environments you explore are colorful and vibrant, making them memorable and easy to tell apart. The dry canyons of Eldin, the tropical waters of Bokitaru, the bright Calabo tree and its city of glass. I especially want to applaud the creativity of Insomniac Games for redesigning Battalia into a frozen world. It was quite fun to explore this location with a different twist. It's fair to say that there's beauty to see everywhere you look, and that Ratchet & Clank is an interactive piece of art. The cutscenes are just as well made, and the quality of the in-engine animation is good enough that it blends very well with the pre-rendered cuts from the Ratchet & Clank movie. If you're one to replay a game over and over, you'll be glad to know that most scenes can be skipped instantly without a load screen. This might come off as a detail, but relying too much on cutscenes to hide load times can really kill the replay value of a game, and I'm glad Ratchet & Clank didn't fall for that. The music of the game is rich and appropriate, contributing to the sense of epicness and sometimes urgency. While not peculiar or daring enough to stand on its own, the soundtrack serves its purpose very well. You know what? I think I just didn't notice the soundtrack before. I guess I was too busy playing, but this is good. Forget what I said. Okay, I actually have nothing to say. I just really like my audio visualizer, so I don't want it to be over. Anyway, moving on. I didn't really notice the sound effects, but that's probably a good thing. Most sounds you'll hear are explosions, wrench hits, gadget beeps, and other weapon noises that I've just got accustomed to. The voice actors did a splendid job though, and it feels good to hear some familiar voices.
Have we met before? Because I'm getting a touch of the old deja vu.
The game is rich in conversations and silly commentary, especially thanks to the narration by Captain Quark. All in all, there is no reason to complain about the audio quality.
Look at him smashing crates. The hubris.
Maybe he's just saving up bulk so we can buy a new weapon to protect the galaxy with.
Hey, who's telling the story here?
While the main plot, some characters, and the locations visited in this reimagining come from the PlayStation 2 game, Ratchet & Clank PS4 doesn't hesitate to change a thing or two. As an example, the lava-covered planet Gaspar, which only had one obligatory mission in the original, has been greatly expanded, and now includes the jetpack from Into the Nexus. The remake also fixes details that were part of some video game logic that would feel odd in a game that now takes itself more seriously.
The Solana Galaxy is a perilous place, as evidenced by the large amounts of ammunition left sitting around in crates.
For instance, the Blargs are trying to steal Pokitaro's waters instead of dropping their toxic wastes on the tropical paradise. More important plot points have been changed, such as the context in which Ratchet meets Captain Quark and the whole subplot about the Galactic Rangers. While these Rangers are barely present in the game and don't bring much to the story, it's interesting to witness Captain Quark's fall from grace. In the PS2 title, Quark was a big-headed celebrity hero, but we never saw him do much to deserve this kind of reputation. I think his character is much more interesting in this new game, and in the movie as well. It's hard to say much without spoiling, but I like how he finds himself working alongside Ratchet only to grow jealous as the Lombax gets a lot of public attention. Dr. Nefarious is also brought into the mix as Drek's hired scientist. This decision makes sense in the context of the movie. If this is the only Ratchet and Clank movie we're ever getting, might as well showcase one of the best villains of video gaming history. This is quite a surprise considering we first met him as an android in Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. Reading between the lines in that game taught us that he used to be organic until Quark left him for dead and his body had to be rebuilt. However, the remake features a Nefarious of flesh and blood, changing part of his backstory and appearance. While this change may displease a couple fans, it's a small price to pay in exchange for more of our favorite villain. And after all, Nefarious' strong personality is much more important than how he looks.
You know, maybe Drek was right. I am a mad scientist.
The changes in the scenario are fully justified when the game reaches its climax, with a few plot twists that will take the fans by surprise in a good way. Sadly, the ending feels quite rushed, and it leaves us with an uncanny feeling. Was this canon or just Quark's glorified version of history?
Hey, wait a minute. I don't recall no brain-eating zombie T-Rex.
Okay, fine, Killjoy.
Are the next games going to take after this one? It just wouldn't feel right for this story to lead into going commando, and the various anachronisms in this title make me want to pretend it's a parallel universe that won't be continued. I'm still hoping for a conclusion to the PS3 series, and I want to solve the mystery of the Lombax's disappearance. But I guess I wouldn't mind a Going Commando remake if we get Angela Cross back. I heard ya. Let's talk about the actual gameplay for a moment. The controls are great and feel just like they were in Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus. The camera controls well and allows for precise aiming and loosens up when you're just running or jumping. As always, Ratchet can jump and do flips, use the helipack to perform long or high jumps. Honestly, there isn't much new in that department. All weapons are very easy to control, which isn't something I can say of every Ratchet and Clank game. However, it feels like the wrench was a bit neglected. Hardcore fans of the series tend to challenge themselves by playing the game only with the wrench, and when you do so, it's hard to miss. The way the animations cut looks a bit off, and downward strikes tend to make you go through enemies or bounce back in buggy ways. Most tiny enemies have a lot more HP than in the first game, preventing you from killing them with a satisfying wrench swing or pyro-sitter burst. I was still slightly disappointed when I had to take my stronger weapons to kill amoeboids. Speaking of weapons, the game includes many of the best ones of the series. A fully automated saw blade launcher, a rocket launcher, a beam that turns enemies into sheep, a sniper rifle that reveals enemy weaknesses. The selection is varied and will keep you entertained. The weapon upgrade system found in Tools of Destruction and Into the Nexus is back, allowing you to slowly improve your weapon stats and unlock new abilities for them as you collect Raritanium. As most of the levels are high-quality recreations of the originals, the gameplay is essentially the same. Run, jump, and swing while using a ton of weapons to blast away alien monsters and robots. Each planet will have some unique enemies to fight, and certain areas will feature small puzzles involving the Hydro Displacer and Trespasser. Bringing back the same hacking minigame with a new game mechanic was a good idea, but the game offers you the option to skip those if they're not to your taste.
Our heroes discovered the easy way out.
Some missions also propose other gameplay types such as hoverboard races and using a turret or a spaceship to fend off an invasion. While I've heard many people complain about the ship's controls, I actually had no trouble with them. I found them better than in the rest of the franchise actually. The hoverboard races do feel different, but neither better nor worse. I do miss the ability to make crazy tricks though. You'll also get to play as Clank for a few runaway scenes and gadget puzzles. The latter were completely redesigned and certainly more interesting than the slow-paced fetch quests that you had to go through in the original game. To sum things up, Ratchet and Clank is one of the most beautiful games of the PS4 and feels very good to play, but it doesn't take much risks in its gameplay mechanics and doesn't bring anything new to the Ratchet and Clank recipe. However, it's sure to please the modern Ratchet and Clank fans and newcomers alike.
Ratchet jumped and jumped and seriously, what's with all the jumping?
Indeed, this game is really great, but...
Yeah, it's pretty good, if you like all CG.
I despise this game. Any pleasure I could experience from playing this has died after completing my first playthrough, and it drives me mad. I'm mad because I know this game is kinda great, and yet I find myself unable to have fun playing it. Here's why. If you want people to believe in a character, they have to be flawed. Perfect heroes are never as appealing, which is why the Ratchet of this story is boring.
You don't have what it takes.
In this version, Ratchet dreams of becoming a superhero. This dream is the reason behind all his actions, and while he might be enjoying this newfound popularity he's got, he's not in it for pride. He simply wants to be like Captain Quark. And this is not the Ratchet we know.
I'm not just a civilian. The Rangers are actually my, friends.
Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that this new character is horrible, but he's just not the same guy. Ratchet isn't supposed to be a comic book nerd or fanboy, he's supposed to be that skater guy. The original Ratchet didn't go out of his way to save the world because it was the right thing to do or because he wanted to be like Captain Quark, he did it because it was cool. That's what made Ratchet a great character. He made players relate to him. Sure, he ended up doing the right thing to save the world, but he was mostly in it for fun. Another important aspect of Ratchet's first depiction was his shitty attitude. Sure, you might argue that the new Ratchet comes off as a much more likable character from the start, but we don't want our characters to be nice guys. Han Solo is cool because he shot first. We want our protagonists to be interesting, instead of white knights in shining armor. Ratchet used to be selfish and immature, and after some events I will avoid spoiling, he got really angry and started taking his frustration out on Clank.
You are friendly, aren't you?
To you, yes. To him, no.
The two characters would constantly argue about what they should do next, and on more than one occasion Clank got his wish because he was the one able to start the spaceship.
I will start the ship if you agree to help that commando.
So, blackmail is it? Fine.
This led to some great character development, and by the end of the game, it brought them together as Ratchet realized his mistakes and Clank forgave him.
What are you smiling at?
This is the Ratchet I always knew was there.
And yet, in order to make Ratchet a nice guy, the people behind this new game and companion movie decided to remove all of Ratchet and Clank's arguments and disagreements. Instead, they just meet and become friends instantly for no apparent reason. They don't really do much together, and by the end of the game, they're still almost strangers. The two guys barely even talk together, and it just really brings the game down.
Ratchet, this is not like you.
What do you know about me? You've spent this whole time looking for Quark.
It's no surprise the movie scored so low after all. This friendship we're supposed to believe in just doesn't make sense, and the protagonists are terribly flat.
Up and down.
Even Chairman Drek's character is ruined, going from a serious and cruel villain with a sinister laugh and bad temper to a joyful guy happily giggling about his robot army and thinking about having t-shirts for his team of evil guys. Really.
They don't know we're coming!
While the movie cuts blend well with the game's superb graphics, the lack of padding is what makes them noticeable. The developers had to cut the action that happens before and after the movie scenes since you'll be playing them, and it's really obvious. The problem is that they failed to animate some kind of transition. There's a clear lack of silence and breathing time in the cutscenes, and I've seen many YouTubers getting confused by the game's introduction because of that.
Just give me a
Sorry,
chance.
no time. Galaxy in jeopardy. Get back out there. And remember, you can do anything. As long as you're me. Next! Meanwhile, on planet Quartu...
Dr. Nefarious, the mad scientist who made all of this possible.
Holy cow. I've died and gone to nerd heaven. Look at this. They have my blaster runs hot. Fungoid with a stick. Oh, Spiro the Space Moose. They even have the Mega Limited Ultra Edition of Intransigence Fall of Blarg.
I don't have much to say about the in-engine cutscenes. They look sharp, are funny, and actually show things the movie did not. And the series humor is still present despite Ratchet and Clank not talking to one another enough.
Call someone who cares about me! I don't want to die!
But here's the issue. While the 2002 game was full of carefully animated conversations with interesting camera angles and movement, the remake replaces most of these with scripted conversations. The camera just jumps between Ratchet and the person he's talking to as they stand completely still. The automated lip movement is very off, some characters look straightforward instead of at the person they're talking to, the emotions look fake, it's just bad. The jump in quality between these and the movie scenes is just too big not to point out. Perhaps they should have gone with an even more minimalist approach, which would have understood as a symbolic representation of a conversation, but this high-resolution, low-realism mess is uncanny. As art approaches realism, flaws tend to stand out more. You might think I'm complaining for nothing here, but this Kid McMark scene really broke the immersion for me. Now you might say that they did this to save on the animation budget, but what did the previous games do to compensate when they were running out of time? When characters weren't talking from spaceships or space stations with very little things to animate in the background, the cutscenes made clever use of still images. Narration over schematics, infomercial parodies, tactical plans drawn in crayon, cardboard cutouts. In the end, all of these contributed to the game's humor and unique style. Heck, even the PS4 title actually has some of these silly scenes, and they totally work.
I am Clank. This is Ratchet. Your uncle received your infobot and asked us to assist you.
Oh, I was wondering if you got that. My agent and I have been running from those Blarg all night. Only we ended up getting separated in the chaos, and I took a
There are ways to save on animation and to make simple conversations look interesting, but the scripted conversations of Ratchet and Clank PS4 are rushed, and I won't accept the animation budget excuse. Plus, I also want to rant some more because the game doesn't let you save multiple files and there is no menu to watch cinematics. So yeah, it took a lot of effort just to make this part of the video. Most of the weapons are taken from other games of the franchise. This is a little bit weird because it breaks the timeline. Some weapons shouldn't even exist yet, others are supposed to be sold in another galaxy. It's really annoying to see Gadgetron selling merchandise made by its competitors. You wouldn't want to see Cave Johnson selling gravity guns in a Portal remake. He's supposed to be dead and he hates Black Mesa. Even worse, the Bouncer, the best weapon of the series without hesitation, was a pre-order bonus.
That one comes with exclusive content if you pre-ordered through Gadgetron.
There's an obvious empty spot in your inventory if you didn't have a chance to get it. But hey, the weapon is actually OP and completely ruins the challenge, so I'm glad I don't have it. Out of the list of weapons, 4 look out of place. Mr. Zircon, the Glove of Doom, the Groovitron, and the Proton Drum. You see, all of these weapons are activated devices that work in the background. Mr. Zircon floats around while firing at enemies, the Glove of Doom spawns robots that hunt enemies to blow up in their faces, and the Groovitron makes enemies dance for a while so you can attack or run past them. Meanwhile, the Proton Drum deals area of effect damage over time. Why so many assist weapons? It feels rather unjustified. Instead of fighting enemies with weapons, I'm spending all my time placing down devices that play the game for me. Sadly, I don't have much footage of this as my weapons are fully upgraded and kill everything instantly, but you know. I'd remove Mr. Zircon and keep the Glove of Doom since it was one of the iconic weapons of the original game, and also because Mr. Zircon has been saying the same lines over and over for I don't know how many games now. The joke has pretty much run its course. The Groovitron is also nice because, well, it's more interesting than the Decoy Glove for sure, so maybe I'd keep it in, but the Proton Drum, not super interesting. We could have gone without it. The Suck Cannon is also missing, which is quite a shame since it was on the American cover of the original game, and truth be told, I would have probably brought back just all the weapons of the original title instead of breaking the timeline. I missed the Tesla Claw in the first Rhino. But the worst part of all this was to be expected. The original Ratchet and Clank game is the only one of the series that does not have an XP system. Because of this, all weapons stay relatively useful throughout the game, as even the weaker weapons still deal a decent amount of damage to the late game enemies. Each weapon has its use. In the remake, the XP system is so omnipresent, weapons are rarely useful a couple of planets after you've bought them. The enemy stats just scale up too quickly. I like Ratchet and Clank games in which I can switch weapons like I breathe, but they kind of ruined that. Instead, I'm just using my weakest weapon because I want to make sure it's upgraded before it's too late and it becomes way too weak to use it. I knew they were gonna do this because it's what they've done for the rest of the series after all, but it's a design choice I hate, and I really wish the series would come back to Ratchet and Clank 1. Sadly, this also causes the downfall of the bomb glove, the weapon you started the game with in the original. To me, this weapon justifies going back to the first game on its own. I love being able to throw tons of bombs quickly, and with its 40 ammo, the bomb glove was very satisfying to use. In fact, I often play through the entire game using almost exclusively the bomb glove. Now, how many modern games give you grenades as a primary weapon? Exactly. Not a single Ratchet and Clank game made its grenade weapon feel as good as the original. They usually make it a lot heavier and give you very little ammo. Nexus did make a pretty good one, and Ratchet and Clank's PS4's weapon isn't too far from it, but the limited ammo and the importance of enemy scaling makes this weapon too weak to rely on after the first hour of the game. Most, if not all, Ratchet and Clank games have rubber band difficulty. If you have too much trouble on a planet, the game will make sure the next one is easier by placing less enemies or making them weaker. This clever trick guarantees you won't be frustrated for too long and also hides this scaling away from you, making you feel like you're great at the game even though the game's actually adapting to your own level of skill. If you die too many times on a boss fight, the boss will have less maximum HP. That comes up at a price though. Difficulty spikes happen on different planets for different players. Each player has their own favorite planets and the ones they disliked because they were too hard. There were 19 planet levels in the original game and only 13 in the remake, 9 of which are recreations of the originals. Since most of the game is a recreation, it's quite a shock when you realize it's about to be over and you haven't seen half of the content you were looking forward to. With each player having their own preference, it's hard to please everyone if you don't keep all the original planets in. Besides, while we do remember finding some of these areas frustratingly difficult, we remember them a lot. We both feared their return and wanted badly. I did have fun playing through the game on my first playthrough, but the simple fact that it didn't recreate my most favorite planets broke the magic. The game was alright, but I thought we were about to get to the awesome part and then it's over? I remember when I got to the last location of the game and realized I only had half an hour of game left and I dropped my controller and thought, you gotta be fucking kidding me. The remake does spread the puzzle and exploration segments well, but the game is much more linear and the gadget puzzles are less interesting. The Hydro Displacer is barely used since 2 of the planets where it was needed before were not recreated. It now acts more as a glorified key more than anything. At least Clank segments are interesting, well, to a certain extent, except that one part where they give you bombs and have you fight warbots. Just fuck this segment. In hard difficulty, they kill you in 2 hits and you gotta fight a bunch of them in a row, and their projectiles kind of aim not exactly at you, but around you, so if you're trying to move away from the projectiles, you tend to walk into them. Like, just fuck this segment. Every time I get there, I want to throw my controller. I also want to point out that not reusing the original soundtrack or remixes was a pretty bad move. David Bergeau's electronic tracks were very original, and hearing them again would have made me a lot more nostalgic in the best of ways. Heck, I don't know the name of any video game music composer other than David Bergeau and Yoko Shimomura from Kingdom Hearts. I still have the whole Ratchet and Clank trilogy original soundtrack on my PSP. Okay, well, bad example, I know I don't actually use my PSP anymore, but still, I kept listening to it on loop. Huge areas with items to find and monsters to kill have been a trademark of the series since the second game. Gaspar takes the spot in the remake, asking you to find 100 Telepatopus brains. And it takes you a couple hours, but you'll probably do it during the main campaign as the first third of them or so are required, and you want the money and experience points anyway. Honestly, I found that segment a bit boring, just like I did in Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus actually. It's long and repetitive, the environment isn't very interesting to explore with all this red, but I find it a lot more satisfying to hunt down huge monsters when I'm walking than when I'm using the jetpack. Tool of Destruction's various Leviathan hunting grounds were much more interesting to explore. The hoverboard races have 2 additional versions each, but again, chances are you'll just do all of them in a row during your first playthrough. The repeated commentary makes them a pain to go through, and you'll probably want to mute it before it drives you nuts.
That's a costly error.
In fact, the whole game is filled with commentary, making it very hard for someone to record an interesting playthrough because they won't be able to place a word. Captain Quark feels the need to make a joke or give a clue every 5 seconds. This is also why I muted the audio of the game, by the way.
Try as he might, Ratchet could not breathe underwater. Of course, Ratchet knew he'd have to surface to breathe. Our heroes discovered the easy way out. And that's how our heroes bypassed the most confounding puzzle in the galaxy. Try as he might, Ratchet could not breathe underwater.
Good job. You could be the recruit we've been looking for. Keep moving to the next part of the course.
Hey there, recruits. I'm Brax Lectress and my specialty is brute force.
In New Game Plus, or Challenge Mode as they call it, I just muted the dialogues and sound effects to enjoy the music, but the game lowers the volume of the music whenever someone is talking, so pretty much all the time. Please just, Quark, shut up and let me play.
Ratchet could not breathe underwater.
The game also has a bunch of hidden treasures. First there's gold bolts that unlock cheats and retro screen filters and stuff.
And here Ratchet finds his very first gold bolt. Let's savor the moment. Okay, enough savoring. Moving on.
And there's collectible cards that increase drop rates. Not exactly the most rewarding items to find. Besides, since each card pack you find is random, and since enemies drop them, you don't really have to go out of your way to find those cards hidden in the planets. Just kill more enemies. Seriously, you can't add collectibles to a game and expect players will feel rewarded for picking them up. This isn't a collectathon. The gold bolts in the original game were used to buy gold weapons, and I'm surprised no other game did that except Nexus. Again, Nexus did so many things right that I don't get how this game could take such a step backwards. Also, the option to disable the HUD turns itself off every 2 minutes for no reason, so I guess I got those gold bolts for nothing. And why did I need to unlock that feature in the first place? There are a few trophies too. For example, you'll need to grind until all your weapons are maxed out, and you'll have to use your Groovytron on all enemies, which is actually buggy to the point where I finished the game countless times and constantly throwing Groovytrons, but I still didn't get a trophy. And those achievements weren't fun at all, it was just a chore. Honestly, it's the full Ratchet and Clank game with the least replay value and durability. Reminds me of Uncharted 4, but that'll probably wait for another episode. In the end, by failing to answer to the expectations brought by my emotional attachment to the series, this Ratchet and Clank reimagining turned out to be one of the most unsatisfying things for me to play. There's no way I can argue that this is a bad game. It's a good game, a great game even, but I still don't have fun playing it. Domino Pivot, Channel 2 News.